that so much of what we're asking of ourselves is just simply impossible. I cannot please everybody all of the time. And when I try to, there's a big cost for myself.
You're listening to the Mindful Mama Podcast, episode 206. Today, we're talking about how to combat perfectionism with Sharon Martin. Welcome to the Mindful Mama Podcast. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting membership, and I'm the author of Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so glad to connect with you again. This is going to be a very powerful, very informative conversation. I'm so excited for you to meet Sharon Martin. She is a licensed psychotherapist specializing in helping perfectionists and people pleasers embrace their imperfections and overcome self-doubt and shame. And she writes the popular blog Happily Imperfect for PsychCentral.com, and she's the author of the CBT Workbook for Perfectionism. So if you have been struggling with perfectionism, you know, that habit that can leave us feeling inadequate, never able to relax, overscheduled, and generally not good enough ever, you will really appreciate this, I hope. It can be so deeply ingrained, and Sharon's going to talk to us about how to combat it. And I want you to listen for some important takeaways, how there's a difference between perfectionism and pursuit of excellence. How certain parenting styles actually can lead to perfectionism, and how to stop people-pleasing and be assertive instead. So I know you are going to get so much out of this episode. I cannot wait. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that I have a few in-person events coming up. I would love to see you in person, give you a big hug. You can join me at the Morning for Moms in New Jersey on February 22nd. Find more information about that at mindfulmamamentor.com/resources. And my spring retreat is coming up. I don't have the details for that, but you can also find that at mindfulmamamentor.com/resources. And of course, the best way to stay informed about all of this is to be on my mailing list, which you can join at mindfulmamamentor.com. And then you'll hear about every one of these episodes. And I just want to let you know there have been some amazing responses to a couple things we've been playing with in the membership. I gave the members a present of 101 skillful responses to your kids. And Natalie said, "Thank you so much, Hunter. I love this list. I've downloaded it to my phone and will print it out and highlight the ones that I know I need reminders for and put it up in the kitchen." And the members have also been really, the lifetime members are enjoying not just the mindful parenting course in the membership, but also the daily practice, which is my 28-day immersion into yoga and mindfulness for self-care. And Rochelle was telling me it feels so good to get my body moving a little in a little more vigorous practice. She did the moderate practice. And she said she already feels her thighs getting stronger, and I feel more alive throughout the day. Thank you, Hunter. So cool. So that daily practice is all, and the 101 skillful responses are all in the membership. So I hope you'll check it out and join. I open it up a few times a year. You can always get on the mailing list at mindfulparentingcourse.com. So some live events, update on the membership, and now on to this episode with Sharon Martin. Sharon, thanks so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to talk to you about perfectionism because I know a lot of people are struggling with perfectionism. In fact, we've had Reshma Saujani on the podcast, who recently wrote the book Brave, Not Perfect, talking about how women, of course, and girls are socialized for perfectionism and all that stuff. And so I'm curious with you, because before we kind of dive into perfectionism itself, like we often are studying what we ourselves are struggling with. So I'm wondering if that has been something that you have been struggling with in your own life.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I mean, I think we're definitely drawn to the things that matter to ourselves as well. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely have had that struggle over the years, and that's part of what sort of led me to writing a book and doing some clinical work as a therapist around this issue, is both realizing that the perfectionism for me was not helpful. It seemed like in the beginning, oh, what a great thing, a great quality, to be really detail oriented and want to get a lot done and have high standards. But as I got older, I started to, realize more and more the ways that it was holding me back and the problems that it was causing for me. And it really wasn't helping me at all. And then, I started to notice this in other people as well, and more clients and young people that I was seeing, that the perfectionism is just so pervasive. I think we have, really gotten to the point where, we're starting to recognize that perfectionism is a problem for so many people. And people are looking for some help, which is a good thing at this point. That I think we're sort of past, for the most part, the idea that, oh, this is a good thing. It used to be, that was sort of the right answer to give, for one of your flaws, when somebody would ask you on a job interview, right? Oh, I'm a perfectionist. And I think now we realize, well, that's not really such a good thing anymore. Um, so yes, I mean, and as I have figured out ways to deal with it for myself, and like I said, for clients, it has sort of been a natural progression of figuring out, here's some things that can be helpful around perfectionism. Here's some ways that we can sort of dial that back and bring some more balance, and some more compassion into our lives, and really be able to do more of the things that we want to do and have more of a fulfilling life. So that's a little bit of sort of how it came full circle for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for the listener who's, I think a lot of us are, we're still kind of we're immersed in our culture of achievement and all of those things. So I think it might be helpful for us to think about, why. Let's just lay it out there. Why is it so harmful? What is wrong with perfectionism?
Well, I think we have to make the distinction between perfectionism and high standards, or striving for excellence. And I think that's probably the most common, misconception about this, is that there's nothing wrong with having high standards. There's nothing wrong with wanting to work hard and get a lot done. The problem is when you have such high standards that they are completely unrealistic and there is no way for you to actually meet them. And when you do accomplish something, you achieve something, you've done something that you feel that one would think you would feel proud of. Perfectionists really don't feel good about it. It's sort of like it's never enough. There's always something more, because we're just chasing some kind of external validation to make us feel like we're good enough. And that's sort of that root of it, is there's really like this really core piece of, I guess you might call it sort of low self-esteem, or sort of some sense of not being as good as everybody else. And so you're always in that mindset of, got to prove myself. And that proving comes out in this perfectionistic behavior. So it ultimately seems like I can't actually be as good as everybody else. I need to be better. I have to be the best. I have to be perfect. And then, like I said, that's just, I guess you might call it sort of low self-esteem, or sort of some sense of not being as good as everybody else. And so you're always in that mindset of, got to prove myself. And that proving comes out in this perfectionistic behavior. So it ultimately seems like I can't actually be as good as everybody else. I need to be better. I have to be the best. I have to be perfect. And then, like I said, that's just, a setup for, feeling lousy about yourself, because you're never going to achieve that goal of perfection. So we're trying to, prove that we're worthy, but we can never do it because we've we've sort of set it up in a way that it's impossible. So we continue to feel inadequate and, lousy and, bad about ourselves in various ways because we can't meet these ridiculously high expectations that we've set for ourselves.
And I imagine that part of the perfectionist problem is a never being a constant doing, right? Like a constant going, like always going, always doing the next thing, never being present, right? Because we're always just always on to what is the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The proving that we're good enough has to be through doing more, achieving more. So you're right. There's sort of a constant busyness. There's often an over scheduling. I would say probably overworking. And so it becomes really difficult to just be in the moment and I think enjoy what we're doing for the sake of doing, just being. And there's a lot of difficulty relaxing, doing things that are just for leisure, for pleasure, maybe even just for yourself, because it sort of feels like, well, what's the point? Because that's not goal directed behavior, and so much of that perfectionist thinking is about I have to do more and be more, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and you also mentioned while we're on like some of the problems with perfectionism, you also mentioned like in your book the critical mind. What the way I see it is that you're in this habit of criticism all the time, and so if there's a lot of self criticism, there's a lot of external judgment and criticism of others too.
Hmm.
So that can
Yeah.
affect relationships, I imagine.
Yes, yes, absolutely, right. And this is vary somewhat from person to person, but it's not uncommon that people who have these really exceptionally high standards for themselves then also set unrealistically high expectations for other people, and so that does translate often into um, unfortunately, behaviors like nagging and criticizing and putting people down, and also just a never being satisfied or content with what other people are doing, right? Whether that's your spouse or your child or your coworker and an employee. So you're always in this sort of state of frustration and being, feeling disappointed and let down that somebody's not doing something either the way you want it to be done, as fast as you want it to be done, the standard that you want it to be done. So there's always this dissatisfaction. And like you said, that of course impacts relationships. I mean, how can we be having a positive interaction with somebody when we're always feeling like you're doing something wrong? It's not good enough.
Yeah, yeah, I think that sometimes we can feel that with I mean, I think a lot of us can sometimes feel that way with our children, right? Like we're all like, we notice how we're in a very critical jag, and that never feels good. It never feels good to be doing that. Okay, so we've got feeling lousy, feeling inadequate, doing too much, never relaxing, maybe having difficult relationships, all this stuff. So why is this so pervasive? Where does it start? Where does it come from?
Well, I think there's a lot of various different factors that probably all come together for people in different formations, but some of it absolutely is the culture that we live in. And much as, I was saying, I think we realize that perfectionism isn't such a great thing anymore. That doesn't mean that our culture and the media and all the images that we're seeing every day are changing around this. There's still as much as there ever was in terms of the airbrushed, models showing you what your perfect body is supposed to look like, or your, immaculately decorated house is supposed to look like. And I think, as you were saying at the very beginning, there's also some gender specific messages that we get as well. And again, it's not to say that men don't suffer from perfectionism; they absolutely do. But I think women still get a much stronger message in terms of their physical appearance, body, their age, things like that about what constitute the perfect woman. And then motherhood is another whole realm that I think it's a really different experience than father's experience in terms of the pressure to perform and sort of be, the perfect mother, um, be able to do everything, whether it's work and home life, and balance that and, make it look easy. But I don't think there's the same expectations for dads. And there's, things are certainly shifting, but I think as moms, we're generally really hard on ourselves in terms of the expectations that we set. And we're often not very kind to each other in terms of the expectations that we have and the judgments that we have for other mothers and, what we see them doing. Um, so there's that. And then, there's a whole nother component, which is certainly our innate personality differences that I think some people are probably just born more predisposed towards the perfectionism than other people. And then, of course, we have our experiences, especially our childhood experiences, which have a huge impact in the way our personalities develop, the way our thinking patterns develop, the way our relationships and our behaviors develop. So there are certainly certain ways that some people are parented that can lead towards perfectionism, and there's something very direct, I would say, about just modeling. So if you had a parent who was a perfectionist and you saw that, if you saw your mother being really concerned about her appearance, or you saw her being very self-critical, or needing to redo things and wanting for them to be perfect, so there's just sort of straightforward modeling, I would say. And there's other parenting styles. One is when you've got a parent who is very harsh and critical, and you get that message pretty clearly that your parent feels like there's nothing, that you're never doing anything that's good enough. So they've got these unrealistically high expectations for you. And they're not really concerned about what you're interested in or what you want to do. It's more about pleasing your parents, and meeting their expectations, and sort of the idea that if you can't do that, it's very sort of a shameful experience for some parents, as if their own self-esteem is based on what their kids are doing.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, your culture, the pressure, and all those things. I guess, are there other causes of perfectionism? Tell me the rest, Sharon, and then I've got a
Okay,
question
sure.
for you.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of other parenting sort of styles that can lead to
Mhm.
perfectionism, and one is what I call just a chaotic family situation, which is a situation where you've got parents who are really just overwhelmed by life and life's problems. Um, and what happens for kids in this situation, not all kids again, but some kids, is that they're looking for some sense of control in their life. They've got this home situation that feels out of control. And so by being perfectionistic, what they're trying to do is bring some sense of order and control to their life. So they become overly controlled. And they feel like, if I can be a good kid, if I can, get the straight A's and make the varsity teams, then then I won't be causing problems for my parents, because I see that my parents already are overwhelmed and have so many problems. And I also feel like, oh gosh, here's something in life that I can, control for myself. Um, and then related to that, but actually different, is also there are parents who they're just distracted. So it's not that they're overwhelmed, but they just have a lot going on. Maybe they, work a lot of hours. Or, sometimes we've just got parents who are distracted and on their phone all the time, and they're just not present with their kids. And so perfectionism can be a way for kids to get attention as well. Um, Again, it's there's sort of an underlying belief that kids have, like, okay, there's something that's not good enough about me, that my parents aren't paying attention to me, to my feelings, they're disinterested. So maybe if I can do something really outstanding, accomplish something amazing, finally my parents will pay attention to me. And I need to, again, there's sort of that sense, like, I need to prove something, I need to earn the love and the attention. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, some of the ways that different parenting approaches can lead to it.
Wow. It's amazing. So if you don't mind me asking, for you, what did you identify for yourself as some of the things that were leading to your own perfectionism when you were struggling with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's one other, piece that, as I had said, I think some people are just sort of naturally, probably predisposed to some perfectionism. And so one of the things that I have figured out is that I also think that part of that might be a connection between people who are highly sensitive. And I don't know if,
Mhm.
if folks are really familiar with that, but you can
We've had
certainly look
a
up.
podcast about that
Okay.
with Julie Bielen, highly
Oh yeah.
sensitive.
Oh yeah.
Yep, great.
Fantastic. Yeah. So people can go back and look at that. And there's a certain amount of the population who are just born as highly sensitive people. That's just the way that their nervous system is wired. And so for me, I think that was really a part of it. Is that I think I've always just been more sensitive to things like criticism, and wanting to please people, and sensitive around the ideas of if I'm doing something that's upsetting somebody, things like that. So anyway, I think there's a component of that as well, that really showed up for me, is that in being perfectionism, is I wanted to be doing everything so well that people would never be disappointed. They'd never be disapproving. There wouldn't be criticism, which again, I mean, it's completely unrealistic. We all know that nobody can do everything perfectly. And even if you did everything, quote unquote perfectly, there are still people who would be upset and disappointed and displeased with it, right?
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not sure I'd want to hang out with you if there was
yeah,
that perfect person, right? You'd be like, "Oh, I'm so inadequate in comparison."
right. Well, yes, and that's another aspect of where perfectionism isn't really helpful in forming relationships and making actual human connections with people. Um, but
Yeah.
anyway, I mean, so that's an aspect of it as well. I think as perfectionists, we're wanting to avoid the criticisms and having people upset with us, which is understandable, but it's not something that we can actually accomplish. The real world involves disappointing people and having people criticize you, and we can all learn how to tolerate those things. It just it takes some practice in being able to shift our thinking, and in some ways also just building up some tolerance to it, because I think as a perfectionist, like, as long as I was trying to avoid the criticism, then I wasn't doing things that taking chances or trying new things, because there was that fear of the failure or the humiliation or the criticism. And again, I mean, it just makes sense that the more you try to avoid those situations, then the more painful they become when they do happen, right? As
Yeah.
we can get ourselves, used to tolerating those things by actually letting ourselves be in situations where we experience some painful things, and we realize, hey, I can tolerate it. It's probably not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I didn't get fired. The world didn't end. My relationship didn't get destroyed. I can figure out how to manage those things, and then that sort of frees you up to be able to do all kinds of different things and take more risks and chances and explore different aspects of yourself, which you hopefully find is satisfying in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, you write in your book that that it takes courage, right? There's a certain amount of courage it takes to be imperfect, because we have to be able to then feel those difficult feelings of something going wrong, and what does that feel like, or something, um something is a criticism, and what does that feel like, and how to, it's like learning how to ride those waves, which of course goes right back to mindfulness. But you also you also talk about perfectionism, that we tend to, people who are struggling with perfectionism tend to miss out because of this fear, right? Because wanting to play it safe, so you know maybe not taking so any risks in life.
Yeah, exactly. Part of that perfectionism that we experience is wanting to be so good at everything. Like I said, that part of that's wanting to avoid the criticism or the sense of failure, because that's so
Yeah.
painful. It's such so to the core of, we're already feeling inadequate. I don't want to do something that I don't know that I'm good at, because I might not be good at it, right? And that's such a difficult feeling for someone who's a perfectionist, or just anyone who's feeling kind of inadequate or less than. So then we just, limit ourselves to the things that we know that we're already good at. Right? Which
Oh,
is, I mean, right? I mean, there's no growth in that, right? I'm just going to keep doing things that I know that I can do, because I'm afraid of possibly not being good at something. Which again, I mean, like, our logical mind can say, of course that makes no sense. I mean, we're going to start out not being good at things. It's through practice generally that we get better at things. Um, and so that's a way of sort of having a more realistic expectation for yourself, and saying, okay, like, I don't have to be good, or maybe I can set this up in a way where I have the ability to, do some practice in a way that's going to be not as embarrassing. That doesn't mean I have to practice before I can show, do this in
mm,
public or something like that. Um, but there's also just a reasonable amount. Nobody wants to, be embarrassed.
yeah.
But part of that feeling, the feeling of being embarrassed is based on the expectation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that it's not okay to mess up and all those things. Okay, so
Mhm.
how for the listener who's, like, nodding and saying, "Oh my god, this is me." How do they start to, dig themselves out? And I imagine that, you talk about in the book about, you kind of walk us through in this workbook about this process, which is really beautiful. But it basically starts with this acknowledgement of, like, this isn't so great in my life, right? And then looking at where it is. So basically, kind of taking a deep look at it. I'll let you describe how do they start to dig themselves out.
Yeah. Like you're saying, I mean, I think the beginning of any process of change is that we have to acknowledge, what problems we're experiencing. Because if we're not, experiencing any problems, why are we going to change, right? There has to be some motivation here for me to say, okay, here's where perfectionism is causing problems for me. That's the reason I want to make some changes. And one of the things that I always like to point out when we talk about changing some of our perfectionist behaviors and thinking is that you don't have to change everything. You don't have to throw it all away, because I think there's often a fear there as well that what's going to happen, maybe I will never get anything done. I'm going to become lazy. I'm not going to be able to do a good job at work, become careless, whatever. I mean, all those kinds of things that are really sort of the flip side. And of course it's just very unlikely that anybody is going to completely do a 180 change. I mean, really what we're talking about is being able to moderate some of these things, because in moderation some of them can be useful. Like I said, if we can get beyond some of the obsessive quality and the fear-based anxiety driven component of it, sure, we can sort of dial that back to a place of, okay, I could have realistic expectations, but they could be high expectations. I can work hard on things, but I can also find a place for, rest and relaxation, and realize that those things can actually help me be more productive and, do a better job when I am in sort of working mode. So that's helpful for a lot of people too, is just to realize that, there may be some aspects of perfectionism that do feel helpful and that you do want to hold on to, and that's fine. We don't have to, throw out the entire thing all at once, right? We're just, and the other thing that I really believe in is that the way to make changes is really baby steps. Like, we're not gonna, again, throw everything out all at once and just say change everything about yourself. You're just going to do a few incremental changes, and those can build on each other, and they really do add up over time, and it ends up being much more sustainable for people as well.
Yeah, and that I love that. I can imagine the listener, just heaving a huge sigh of relief. I don't have to change everything, and we don't have to throw away all these behaviors. And absolutely, those bit by bit changes, of course, are the most lasting. And you talk, of course, about working with that self-critical mind. And it's really interesting because, we've talked about self-compassion in a lot of different ways here. And Sharon Salzberg has called loving kindness, as it was originally developed, as an antidote to fear, right? And this fear is what is driving this perfectionism. So, first, maybe it might be helpful though to think about, you ask a really important question in this book, and I think that we've talked about this a lot on the podcast about criticism, but you asked the question, isn't self-criticism motivating? And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. We've had Krista Neff on, but just if it's your first time listener, let's hear it again, because it's something that I think we can't underline too many times.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think for a lot of people it's counterintuitive to what we have been taught all along, is that, we need to be hard on ourselves, we need to be cracking the whip, and that's the only way that we're going to get anything done. Right. So I feel like that's, sort of the mindset that I grew up with is, you have to beat yourself up if, you've done something wrong. Otherwise, you're not going to correct it. You're just going to, continue to make the same mistake. But fascinating. I mean, and the research is amazing on this. That does not help. And again, I think this is a great place to think about your experience as a parent and how you handle these kinds of situations, with our kids, because it's easier to see when you think about that dynamic as a parent, when you can offer your child compassion when they have, made a mistake, or when they, haven't come through on a commitment. There's something there, chances are that they are already feeling bad about it themselves. And you're
Mhm.
going to be able to cultivate both, a much healthier relationship, but you're also going to be able to help motivate them, encourage them in the direction, that you want them to, by offering them that understanding and that loving acceptance, that becomes the basis for the desire to do better, if you will. And so the same thing ends up being true for ourselves, is when we just beat ourselves up over things, we end up just feeling worse. We just feel, we sort of go into that place of shame and more self-criticism, right? I'm never going to be able to do this. And it becomes this catastrophic kind of thinking, like I'm just the worst person ever. I'm a complete failure. And then, I beat myself up. I don't feel more motivated. I don't feel any more energy. I don't feel hopeful. I don't feel like I can do something better or different here. But when I turn that around and I'm understanding and I say, I can understand that this is hard, then I start to be able to shift some of that and be able to say, okay. And I think one of the difficulties that people have with self-compassion is they feel like it's just sort of mushy, like I'm just letting myself off the hook and there's no accountability. So when we add in the accountability piece, and we, maybe sort of call it compassionate accountability or loving accountability, it starts to make more sense, because, we can do it in this kind, loving way. But it doesn't mean that I'm just saying, oh, it's okay, you made a mistake, or you hurt somebody's feelings. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm just saying I can understand it. And by being kind to myself, I can help myself better to figure out how to make a correction, or how to learn from that experience, rather than, like I said, sort of going into that place of just shame and I'm awful and I'm horrible. There's sort of no hope for me.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Sharon, for underscoring that, because I think it's just so pervasive in our culture that we are so judging. And you offer a beautiful affirmation for forgiving ourselves, a forgiveness affirmation, which I love. You have like a formula for it. Um, do you mind if I read it? I think
Go
it's
ahead.
great. Yeah. So there's two blanks in here that I'll just read. I forgive myself for blank, and then I release myself from blank, and that means like whatever the feelings are associated with it, like maybe guilt or shame or whatever. I accept that I'm human and I make mistakes. Now I would do things differently, but did the best I could at the time, and I forgive myself for my mistakes. I love that so much. That's really a beautiful little mantra there.
Yeah, I think so many of us do that judgment from hindsight, right? And it's unfair. It really is to know what you know now, or to see how the outcome of something and to look back and be judgmental of yourself. It's really true that we do the best that we can with the information that we have, with the person that we are, with the circumstances. And that doesn't mean, again, that we might not have some regrets or that we would choose to do things differently if the situation presented itself today. But at that point, that was the best that you could do. It seemed like the best option. And that's all we can ask of ourselves, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that because I think I see forgiveness as really about, in some ways, like clarifying things and letting go and like letting the past go in some ways and moving on from a better place. And I, even as I read that, like I feel that heart opening quality of it. It really is opens us up for more compassion. And really truly, like as you talked about in the opposite way, as we're more critical in our own minds, we're more critical with our relationships. As we're more compassionate in our own minds and loving, then we're more compassionate in our relationships. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, both, right, our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others. And I think that's ultimately what it is really all about, is accepting really our humanness on some basic level, is that we all make mistakes and we all screw up sometimes. I mean, sometimes they're really inconsequential. And sometimes they're a big deal, right? I mean, that we truly do things that cause pain to other people, or that create really difficult situations or problems for ourselves or for other people. But again, I mean, one thing is, like, we've all had some experience like that, right? I mean,
Hmm.
none of us can say that we haven't. And so it's unfair, again, to hold ourselves to some standard that's different than everybody else, right? Like, if we can just say, this is part of the human experience, is that we screw up sometimes, right? And part of that is understanding that we all do it. And that's that place where we can start to have some compassion and say, I'm not that different than anybody else. Um
And
and from
that can probably help, that can help us have that compassion for other people that we need, like it's terrible to go around our days like judging everybody and being so critical of everybody. I mean, that makes life, daily life really unpleasant and miserable for ourselves. And if you're in the habit of really, listener, of if you notice like, oh, I'm judging a lot, oh, I'm critical a lot, not to be, I'm not saying this for you to be critical of yourself, but to notice that that might be a habit. It's a very normal, like kind of human habit. We have a negativity bias, right? And notice how that feels in yourself. Like, does it feel good? Does it add to your peace? Does it add to your happiness to be judgmental and critical of others in the world? And then, starting to notice how it is for yourself. It really letting, allowing for our own humanity, gives us, gives other people, lets us allow for other people's humanity too, and have some more compassion, have some more forgiveness in general.
Yeah, exactly. I think when we start to move away from the judgment, then that is where we can really connect with people.
Hmm.
There's such a tendency, and again, I don't know how much of this is just innate in us, and how much of this we are taught. But it almost feels like maybe there's sort of a scarcity component to it, as if we have to keep judging and like rank ordering ourselves in comparison to everybody else, as if there's not going to be enough. Like, we can't just say we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. Um, and we don't need to compare them necessarily. We don't need to prove all the time that we're as good as or better than, but we could just accept that we all have unique gifts, we all have value, and it doesn't necessarily need to be specifically defined or measured. I think I think
Mm-hmm.
there's so much of that. Like, I need, again, sort of that proof. Maybe some of it comes from some of the early experiences in school, or things like
Mm-hmm.
that, where there's always got to be some way of saying, oh, this is how valuable or how good something is.
Yeah, that external validation. It's really interesting you bring it back to that because that's something that I really search for in, my kids. I was a founding board member of a public Montessori school here in the state of Delaware, and that I love those learning modalities where they're kind of trying to keep that intrinsic motivation, that internal validation, and it's not so much about that external validation. And you can see how it plays out in things like this, how it comes all the
Yeah.
way around, kind of full circle. So you talk about a couple of what I would love for you to, think about those fears that are underneath the perfectionism. You know, you have some questions I think are really astute to uncover, what you call the cognitive distortions, or
Mm.
these basically like untrue thoughts that are these thoughts that are leading us astray. What are some of the questions someone can ask if they feel like they're kind of stuck in this perfectionist spiral and they want to kind of jolt themselves out of it?
Yeah. I'm just going to back up a
Oh, yeah,
smidge
yeah,
here,
please
just
do.
to say,
Okay.
because just in case some people aren't really familiar with this idea of cognitive distortions, which I always think it sounds really horrible to think like your thoughts are distorted. So just sort of set that aside. We all have cognitive distortions. We all basically, it just sort of means we all see the world through our own lens, right? Through our own experience, through our own beliefs about ourselves. And it sort of colors our perception of things. We all, we know that we don't all see the world in the same way, or we can have the same experience and have different thoughts and feelings about it. Um, and so, as we grow up, we develop certain beliefs about ourselves, and as we've been talking, you might kind of notice some of the ones that are common for perfectionists that tend to be around things like, I believe that I'm, not as smart or as funny or as pretty, or some sort of element of I don't think I'm as good as everybody else. And so if I have that belief about myself, I tend to go about the world finding evidence unconsciously, through that negativity bias. I'm just sort of going to find things that sort of fit with that. Say, oh, there's proof that I really am not good at math, right?
Mhm.
Instead of being able to say, maybe I just, I made a simple arithmetic error. So if my belief is I'm not good at math, I'm going to, see that arithmetic error and say, there's more proof that I suck at math, right? Instead of just saying, oh, I was distracted and I made a mistake, right? Doesn't necessarily have to mean I'm lousy at math, right? Um, but so once you realize that you're having that negative, distorted thought that's not necessarily accurate, what you want to do is sort of dig into that and like you said, sort of ask yourself some questions to find out, is this really true or not? Because we can't really change the thought until we realize that it's off, right? You might just sort of have a sense like, okay, here something that I'm not sure if this is very true or not. um, but one thing you can ask yourself is just, I mean, is it a helpful thought? I mean, is it actually, you know, bringing you closer to what you want to achieve? And so, if I'm trying to feel better about myself and be less perfectionistic, having a thought that I'm, lousy at math, is that helpful for me? Probably not. So I can then sort of ask myself, well, maybe is there a different way that I could think about this? Um, or you could just ask yourself, are there other sources of evidence, right? I shouldn't, come to a conclusion that I suck at math based on one mistake, right? I need to explore this a bit further and say, is there other evidence to support this? Maybe I could even ask, some other people for their opinion and see if they have, some thoughts too, about it, because sometimes other people see things a little bit differently. And so they might be helpful in being able to, point me in a different direction with it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't have
Yeah.
the list in front of me, so I'm not
No, those
remembering
are
anything
great.
else.
Those are great. I mean, is that helpful? Do other people see this? Is there other evidence? So those are ways to kind of just check that habit energy that we've maybe developed over time, and to make it better. So
Yeah. Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to ask you about is this idea of, we talked, about how perfectionists are really wanting to make themselves feel good and wanting to please other people. They're basically wanting to do everything well so that nobody's ever upset with them. And so there's this underlying thing of people pleasing, right? And so you talk about how learning to be assertive in a chapter in your book, which I think is great. So I wonder if maybe you could just talk a little bit about learning to be um, assertive if we're always people pleasing and find
Hmm.
ourselves in that place.
Yeah, there's a few different things that I think intersect here. And like you said, part of the struggle here is that we want to keep everybody happy all of the time, but we just can't. So I mean, I think part of it always comes back to trying to set realistic expectations and understand that so much of what we're asking of ourselves is just simply impossible. I cannot please everybody all of the time. And when I try to, there's a big cost for myself, right? And that, over time, we usually start to feel the effects of putting everybody before ourselves, right? We get really tired and drained and cranky. Maybe we have health problems or mental health problems. So it definitely starts to show up. So once we can sort of accept on a very simple basis, like this is a truth for all of us. It's not, there's sort of nothing deficient about you. It's just something that nobody can do. Um, and so the other part of it is if we're going to be more assertive, we're going to ask for more of what we want, or speak up more for what we need, in different situations and with different people. We have to first know what we want. We have to know what we need. We have to know what we feel. And this is a place where perfectionists often are very disconnected from themselves, right? Again, if so much of the focus is on other people and keeping other people happy and meeting their expectations, often we really don't even know, how am I feeling about this situation? Um, what do I need? There's the connection between, what you need is going to be connected back to how you feel about something. So often, what we need to first do is really just slow down a little bit and start to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, okay, how am I feeling? What is it that I need in this situation? And that can take some practice if you're not used to doing it and you're not, somebody who tends to slow down and pay attention to their feelings. It can feel really awkward. Both, I think, just the slowing down, but sort of allowing some of the feelings and the needs to come up. Again, I think we have to keep coming back to, that those realistic expectations and normalizing that everybody has needs. There's not a single person who has zero needs, and that, again, it's such it's this unrealistic expectation that we have, like, oh, I shouldn't need anything, I shouldn't want anything, I shouldn't have to ask for anything. um, Humans just do not work that way. Right?
Yeah,
We all
yeah,
need things from ourselves, from other people, from the universe. And so, the best way to get your needs met is to ask. Right? I mean, that's not a guarantee, but if I ask my spouse for what I need in the relationship, it's going to be much easier for him to be able to give me that. um, versus if I don't ever ask, I don't even ever say, I don't need anything, I don't want anything. Then what tends to happen again, like the resentment starts to build. My needs are unmet. I'm unhappy. I'm cranky. I'm tired. Right? That's not a good recipe, both for my own health and well-being, but it's not going to be successful for the relationship either. So, again, I mean, we have to sort of get out of these, distorted ways of thinking that somehow by being perfectionistic and people pleasing, I'm going to actually be making people happy. It's not going to work out because, right, if I'm unhappy and I don't have my needs met, how is that actually going to, be pleasing to my husband, right? I mean, especially
yeah.
if we're talking about relationships of people who care about you, I mean, they want to meet your needs, right? They want to give you some of what you want and need in a relationship.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so anyway, that's the beginning of it, is figuring out like what is it that I need, and then allowing yourself to say, oh, okay, this is okay for me to ask for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right, and then we can start the practicing of how do I actually say this to somebody in a way that is respectful and kind and direct, and underlying that is a belief that you feel like it's okay, for you to do that. And it is very much a practice. Like I said, for folks who just aren't used to doing it, it takes a while. Um, and part of that is also sort of getting past some of the fears of what's going to happen. Right. And
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
can be helpful too, I think, is asking yourself, what is it that I'm afraid is going to happen? If I start to be more assertive and I ask for what I want or what I need, what is the fear that's holding me back there? And
Mm.
then we can kind of explore, is that likely to happen? Are those fears, what are they based on?
Yeah. 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 Well, this is beautiful. So, um, you know, dear listener, there's so much in here. I'm sure you'll want to go back and re-listen to this episode. But for all the wisdom and the information about overcoming perfectionism that you may have found from hearing Sharon here, there is so much more in her book, the CBT Workbook for Perfectionism. There's like a ton of, you can fill it out yourself. It's really an incredible resource that I think is amazing. Um, Sharon, thank you so much for doing this work, for putting this incredible workbook together, for doing the work of shining a light on this and laying out in such a very clear and systematic way how we can start to pull ourselves out of spinning our wheels with this perfectionism, which is just hurting so many people. And we don't want to be passing this on necessarily. I imagine for you, um, having kind of worked with the perfectionism yourself and overcoming life is maybe a little sunnier on the other side, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and like I was saying, I mean, it's not that I don't ever fall into that perfectionism trap ever. I certainly, catch myself still, having, a perfectionist thought or wanting to redo something to make it even better. But now I'm just much more aware of it, and there's that space to be able to say, you know what, it's good enough. And like I said, like I've been able to build up some tolerance, to some of the discomfort in not being so perfectionistic, and it does. I mean, even just something like being able to write a book, right? That a book about perfectionism. I know it's ironic and so forth, but of course, it's probably not something that I could have done 10 years ago. It really comes from that place of being able to say, okay, like I can take a chance on this. When you write a book, you don't know if anybody's going to buy it.
Yeah.
And so you're putting yourself out there, and you have to be able to say, okay, well, I feel good about it. Whether I get the external validation is not the point. That was not the point. I mean, I do hope that it is helpful, of course. But even if for some people it's not, that's okay too, right? Because that's me being able to get to that place of saying, I don't need everybody else to tell me I'm good enough. I can feel good
Mm.
about myself regardless of what other people think, or regardless of how much I accomplish, or how many degrees I get or how many books I write. That's not what I'm going to base my self worth on.
Amen, sister. I love it. I love it. So wonderful, Sharon. So, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Well, you can go to my website, which is livewellwithsharonmartin.com. And from there, you can find me on social media and all the other places.
So wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. And I think it's wonderful, all the work that you've done. And I know it's going to help so many people. So thank you so very much, Sharon.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for having me on, allowing me to spread this around for more people to hear it.
Thank you so much for listening. I loved Sharon and what she has to say. we got to combat this perfectionism. It leads to misery for everyone in our lives. It is not good. It is not even possible to be perfect. We gotta work against this. So this is something I work with my coaching clients often. And Sharon's work is such a gift. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am hoping that I'll get to see you in person at one of my in-person events. I will be in New Jersey on February 22nd. Actually, I will be at the Zen Parenting Radio Conference on the 28th and 29th. You can buy a copy of Raising Good Humans there. And I'll be holding my spring retreat soon. So if you want details on all of these, you can make sure you're on the mailing list, because I don't have the details for the spring retreat as of recording this. So that's the best way to know about all those things. And so I'm wishing you I think that's it. I think that's all I got to say. Just if you've enjoyed this, if you got something out of it, if you know some perfectionists who might need it, maybe you do. I kind of know a couple. If you're brave, you can forward them this episode. Maybe just share it generally on social media, and share the wisdom around. It can only help. So I'm wishing you a beautiful week, my friend. I'm wishing you peace. I'm wishing you lovely, beautiful imperfection, perfectly imperfect, and embracing that. And I will be back in your inbox next week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the reviews on Apple Podcasts and where you listen. Those always, it's like amazing to read those. Thank you for the reviews on Raising Good Humans on Amazon. Thank you. That makes such a huge difference. So thank you. I'm wishing you a peaceful week. I'm wishing you joy. I'm wishing you moments where you remember gratitude, remember to appreciate what's around you. I'll be working on that too with you. All right. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. Namaste.
I'd say definitely do it. It's really helpful. It will change your relationship with your kids for the better. It will help you communicate better. And I'd say communicate better as a person, as a wife, as a spouse. It's been really a positive influence in our lives. So definitely do it.
I'd say definitely do it. It's so worth it. The money really is inconsequential when you get so much benefit from being a better parent to your children and feeling like you're connecting more with them and not feeling like you're yelling all the time or you're like, why isn't things working? I would say definitely do it. It's so worth it. It'll change you.
No matter what age someone's child is, it's a great opportunity for personal growth, and it's a great investment in someone's family. I'm very thankful I had this.
You can continue in your old habits that aren't working, or you can learn some new tools and gain some perspective to shift everything in your parenting.
Are you frustrated by parenting? Do you listen to the experts and try all the tips and strategies, but you're just not seeing the results that you want? Or are you lost as to where to start? Does it all seem so overwhelming with too much to learn? Are you yearning for a community of people who get it, who also don't want to threaten and punish to create cooperation? Hi, I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, and if you answered yes to any of these questions, I want you to seriously consider the Mindful Parenting membership. You will be joining hundreds of members who have discovered the path of mindful parenting and now have confidence and clarity in their parenting. This isn't just another parenting class. This is an opportunity to really discover your unique, lasting relationship, not only with your children, but with yourself. It will translate into lasting, connected relationships, not only with your children, but your partner too. Let me change your life. Go to mindfulparentingcourse.com to add your name to the waitlist, so you will be the first to be notified when I open the membership for enrollment. I look forward to seeing you on the inside. mindfulparentingcourse.com.